The Roman-Etruscan Wars, also known as the Etruscan Wars or the Etruscan-Roman Wars, were the wars fought between ancient Rome, in both the regal and the republican periods, and the Etruscans. The Roman-Etruscan Wars were a series of brutal conflicts fought between ancient Rome and the Etruscan city-states from the 6th to the 3rd centuries BCE. These wars were marked by fierce battles, sieges, and the strategic use of infantry formations such as the Greek-style phalanx by Etruscan warriors and evolving Roman legions. The wars involved prolonged fighting for control over central Italy, with key battles such as those against Veii and Tarquinii, resulting in Rome's eventual conquest of Etruria by 265 to 264 BCE. When the Etruscan was thought that to grow by learning knowledge and strengths, so the Etruscan was growing up and the other empire rulers were communicate with Romans as the Etruscan was growing up. One day they grow and become a threat to Roman. So the Romans was under the dilemma and announced a war against the Etruscan. The disagreement about when the Etruscan-Roman Wars ended in the Roman-Etruscan Wars from 509 BC to 234 BC. In the 8th century BC, during the reign of Rome's first king, Romulus, the Fidenates, an Etruscan people, decided to suppress Rome as a future threat and began to lay waste to its territory, in opposition to which Romulus marched on Fidene and camped a mile from it, setting an ambush in the thickets. He brought the rest of the army to the gates of Fidene to provoke them into exiting the city. Seeing the appearance of disorder, the Fidenates sallied out in pursuit and were caught in the ambush. Romulus' troops drove the Fidenates through their gates so closely that they were not able to close them, and took the town. The Veientes were concerned at the situation with Fidene both because of its proximity to Veii and their consanguinity with the Fidenates, who were also Etruscan, and accordingly launched an incursion into Roman territory. After having done so, the Veientes returned to Veii with their booty. Romulus and the Roman army followed and met the Veientes in battle outside the walls of Veii. The Romans were victorious and the Veientes fled into the city. The Romans, not having the strength to take the city by storm, instead laid waste their lands. The Veientes sued for peace, and a 100-year treaty was concluded upon the Veientes giving to the Romans a part of their own territory. In the 7th century BC, during the reign of Rome's third king, Tullus Hostilius, the Fidenates and Veientes again went to war with Rome. According to Livy, they were incited to war by Medius Fuficius, the dictator of Alba Longa, who had been defeated by and had become in substance a vassal, become a slave for Rome. The Fidenates openly revolted against Rome. Tullus summoned Medius and his army from Alba Longa and, together with the Roman army, marched on Fidene. The Roman and Alban army crossed the Anio and camped near the confluence of the Anio and the Tiber. The army of Veii also crossed the Tiber, and, with the Fidenates, formed up battle lines next to the river, the Veientes closest to the river and the Fidenates nearest the mountains. The Roman-Alban army formed up facing them, the Romans towards the Veientes and the Albans towards the Fidenates. The battle commenced. However, Medius and the Alban troops headed slowly towards the mountains, intending to desert. Tullus exhorted his troops, telling them the Alban army had moved pursuant to his orders. The Fidenates, who being Roman colonists understood Latin, heard what Tullus said about the Albans and feared the Alban army would charge down upon them from the rear. Accordingly, they fled the battle. The Romans then routed the Veientes. War with the Etruscans under Servius Tullius. In the 6th century BC, according to Livy, Rome's 6th king Servius Tullius went to war with Veii, after the expiry of an earlier truce, and with the rest of the Etruscans. Little is said of the war, except that the king was conspicuous for his valor and good fortune, that he routed a great army of the Etruscans and Veientes, and that the war helped cement his position in Rome, as he had only recently become king. According to the Fasti Triumphals, Servius celebrated 3 triumphs over the Etruscans, including on November 25, 571 BC, and May 25, 567 BC. 3 Romans now defended the Pons Sublicius. The right wing's commanders Spurius Larsius and Titus Herminius Aquilinus, plus Publius Horatius Coccles, a junior officer on guard at the bridge when he saw the Janiculum taken by a sudden assault and the enemy rushing down from it to the river. The three defenders withstood sword and missile attacks until the Roman troops had all crossed. Livy's briefer and more skeptical account tells of no battle, only that Horatius' own men, a panic-struck mob, were deserting their posts and throwing away their arms. However, Horatius' courage manages to shame the two veteran commanders Herminius and Lartius to assist him momentarily with his defense of the bridge. Dionysius' account explains Herminius and Lartius, their defensive arms being now rendered useless by the continual blows they received, began to retreat gradually. They order Horatius to retreat with them, but he stood his ground. Understanding the threat to Rome if the enemy were to cross the river, he ordered his men to destroy the bridge. The enemy was shocked not only by Horatius' suicidal last stand, but also by his decision to use a pile of bodies as a shield wall. Horatius was struck by enemy missiles many times, including a spear in the buttocks. Hearing word from his men they'd torn up the bridge, he leaped fully armed into the river, and swimming across he emerged upon the shore without having lost any of his weapons. Publius Horatius Cockles had made the war in the violent war where all the opponent due to fear, some left the war and some are die, and the Publius Horatius Cockles made the war win. However, this may be a later elaboration, as the famous statue of Horati Cockles, meaning one-eyed because he lost an eye in the Battle of the Sublician Bridge. The Etruscans attacked immediately before Volterra. A day-long battle brought no victory, but in the night the Etruscans withdrew to their fortified cities, leaving their camp and equipment to the Romans. Encamping his army at the Etrurian border, Barbatus led a lightly armed force in the devastation of the countryside. Rome was the eventual victor in the wars, and the last Etruscan resistance was crushed in 264 BC when Volsinii was destroyed after a slave revolt. The Etruscans were assimilated into Roman culture, and Rome became one of the Mediterranean superpowers amongst the Greeks and the Carthaginians, though the Etruscan language survived for another 300 years until the early 1st century AD. Rome was the eventual victor in the wars, and the last Etruscan resistance was crushed in 264 BC when Volsinii was destroyed after a slave revolt.